Betrayal in the battlefield. The sky was burning red, the ground was shaking under the sound of war machines, and smoke covered the battlefield like a heavy blanket. Among the broken weapons and fallen soldiers lay a young alien warrior girl, her armor cracked, her body bleeding, her breath slow but stubborn. She had fought bravely for her people. She had trusted her commanders. But in the final moments of battle, she saw the truth that cut deeper than any blade. Her own comrades, the warriors she had trained with, turned their backs on her. They whispered of her weakness, they called her a burden, and then they left her in the dust. She watched them walk away while her body trembled with pain, her vision blurred, and the voices of betrayal echoed louder than the cries of war. She tried to rise, but her legs failed. She tried to call out, but no one listened. The battlefield swallowed her voice. She felt the heavy taste of dust in her mouth, and the sharp sting of wounds in her side. Every breath reminded her that she had been left to die. Her heart screamed with anger, not only at her enemies, but at her own kind who abandoned her. She was a warrior, yet they treated her as nothing. The cold silence after the battle was worse than the clash of swords. The night fell slowly, and fear crept closer with every minute. She was alone, broken, and forgotten. Then, footsteps echoed through the ruins, slow and careful, not like the march of soldiers, but the cautious tread of someone who did not belong. Her alien eyes narrowed, her hand weakly reaching for a broken blade lying beside her. She thought it was one of the betrayers returning to finish the job. Her breathing quickened, pain stabbed her ribs, but she lifted the weapon with shaking hands. Out of the shadows stepped a figure, different, taller, armored but not like her people. His face was hidden behind a helmet. Why? And his steps carried purpose. It was a human. The girl froze, confusion rushing through her mind. Humans were enemies here. At least that was what she had been taught. The human stopped a few steps away, his eyes scanning her broken form. The blood, the cracks in her armor, the blade trembling in her grip. For a long moment, silence stood between them, heavy and sharp. The human could strike her down easily. She was too weak to fight. But instead, he did something unexpected. He knelt beside her, slowly removing his helmet, revealing a scarred face but calm eyes. He spoke in a low voice, words she barely understood, but the tone was clear. He was not here to harm her. She blinked, struggling to believe. Her own kind had left her. And yet here stood a human, an enemy, reaching out his hand. Her pride screamed not to accept. Her training shouted to strike, but her body was too weak, and her heart was too tired. Her blade slipped from her hand, falling to the ground with a soft thud. Her chest heaved, and her vision darkened. Before she lost consciousness, she felt strong arms lifting her, carrying her out of the dust and ruin. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was the human's face, stern yet strange with something she had not felt in a long time. Compassion. When she awoke again, she was no longer lying in the dirt of the battlefield. Her body was still weak, but she was alive. Her heart raced with confusion. She turned her head and saw him again, the human, sitting near the fire, cleaning his weapon, his eyes flicking to her with a quiet calmness. For a moment she thought it was a dream, that he had saved her only to use her, only to claim her as a prize. But he spoke again, his words simple, his tone steady, telling her she was safe. She did not understand all the human language, but she understood enough. He had saved her. Her mind spun with questions. Why would he save her? What did he want? How could an enemy treat her with more hope? A human's choice. The firelight flickered against the stone walls of the small shelter, casting long shadows that danced like restless spirits. The alien warrior girl lay weak on a rough blanket, her wounds aching, her mind filled with questions she could not silence. The human sat nearby, sharpening a blade with calm movements, his scarred hands steady, his eyes glancing toward her every so often. There was no hatred in his gaze, only something she could not name, a strange mix of pity and determination. She wanted to ask him why he had saved her, but her throat was dry and her pride heavy. Finally, she whispered with a broken voice, "Why did you not leave me like the others?" Her words trembled in the air, filled with anger and shame. The human paused, his hand stopping on the blade. He looked at her and spoke slowly, choosing words she could understand. "Because no one deserves to be left to die like that," he said, his voice steady. "Not even an enemy." Her heart shook at those words. Her own people had abandoned her, but here was a human calling her life worth saving. She turned her face away, hiding the sudden sting of tears in her eyes. The human continued working on his blade, but his presence felt different. He was not her enemy in this moment. He was her protector. Outside, the night carried the distant cries of scavenger beasts, their howls echoing through the broken ruins of the battlefield. The girl clenched her fists, knowing that if not for this human, she would already be their prey. It was a bitter truth. Her life now rested in the hands of someone she was raised to fight against. Hours passed slowly, the crackle of fire filling the silence. Her breathing grew easier, though pain still burned in her side. The human stood and moved closer, placing a small flask of water near her lips. She hesitated, suspicion rising in her chest, but her thirst be. As stronger, she drank, and the cool liquid soothed her dry throat. "Rest," he said simply, then turned back to the fire, his tone not commanding, not mocking, just calm. The alien girl closed her eyes, but her mind refused to rest. Thoughts of betrayal and survival fought inside her. Memories of her people flashed, how they once called her strong, fearless, one of the best. But when the battle turned against them, they had pointed to her as the weak link. She remembered the cold eyes of her commander, the sharp words, "Leave her," and the steps walking away. Her chest tightened, and her claws dug into the blanket. Beside her, the human noticed her trembling but said nothing, giving her silence instead of pity. At dawn, the light of the rising sun broke through the cracks in the roof of the shelter. The human was already awake, his pack strapped on, his weapon ready, his eyes scanning the horizon. She tried to sit up, wincing in pain, and he immediately moved to her side, steadying her with strong arms. "Careful," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You're not healed yet." She pushed his hand away weakly, pride still burning inside her, but in truth she needed his help to even stand. He guided her outside, the air sharp with the smell of ash and smoke. The battlefield stretched endlessly, broken and lifeless. She looked at the ruined ground, remembering the betrayal, the dust where she had nearly died. A whisper escaped her lips. "Why save me, when your kind and mine are enemies?" The human met her eyes, his gaze steady. "Because I'm not fighting for your kind or mine anymore," he said. "I'm fighting for what's right." Her heart thudded in her chest, his words carrying a weight she could not ignore. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken truths. She realized then that this human had made a choice, not to kill, not to walk away, but to, save, a choice her own people had not made. She felt a crack in the armor of her pride, a sliver of respect forming where hatred once lived. The enemy returns. The morning was quiet, but the alien warrior girl knew the silence was dangerous. The fire had burned low, the air heavy with smoke and ash, and every breath reminded her that the world outside was not safe. She sat against the stone wall, her wounds still aching, when she noticed the human's eyes narrow as he studied the horizon. His hand tightened on his weapon, his body stiff like a wolf ready to strike. She felt the air change, the stillness breaking. A storm was coming. A faint echo of voices carried through the ruins, sharp and cold. Words she recognized. They were the voices of her own people, the same warriors who had left her bleeding in the dust. Her blood ran cold, her claws curled into fists, anger mixed with fear inside her chest. "They are hunting me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They want to erase their betrayal by ending me." The human looked at her, his expression unreadable, but his voice steady. "Then we face them together." She stared at him, disbelief flashing across her face. This human owed her nothing, yet he was willing to fight beside her. Her heart burned with shame and pride at the same time. She had once been the warrior protecting others, and now he was standing to protect her. The footsteps grew louder, armored boots crushing the stones, the sound of blades being drawn slicing the air. Shadows moved across the entrance of the shelter, dark figures circling like predators. The human lifted his weapon, his eyes calm, his stance unshaken. The first of the betrayers stepped into view, his armor polished, his face twisted with cruelty. He sneered when he saw her, broken but alive. "You should have stayed in the dirt," he spat, his voice full of venom. Her claws trembled, But before she could speak, the human stepped forward, his blade gleaming in the morning light. "You will not touch her," the human said, his woo as simple but sharp as steel. The alien warriors laughed, mocking the idea of a single human standing against them. The laughter ended quickly when the human moved fast as lightning, his blade cutting through the first attacker. Blood sprayed across the stones. The betrayers stumbled back, shock on their faces. The alien girl's heart pounded, her chest heaving. She had never seen such speed, such courage from someone who was supposed to be weaker. Another enemy lunged forward, but the human met him head-on, their weapons clashing with sparks, the sound ringing across the ruins. The girl forced herself to rise, grabbing her broken spear, her body weak but her spirit aflame. She staggered into the fight, striking at one of the betrayers, the broken spear tip cutting across his arm. Her enemy roared, swinging his blade, but the human blocked it, saving her once again. Together they fought, side by side, every movement unspoken yet in perfect rhythm. Her claws struck where his blade could not, his shield covered her when her legs faltered. For the first time in her life, she felt what true partnership meant. Not with her people, but with this human. The battle raged in the ruins, dust rising with every strike, cries of pain echoing across the stones. One by one the betrayers fell, their arrogance shattered, their blood staining the earth they thought they controlled. The last warrior standing met the human's eyes, fear finally breaking through his pride, and he fled into the shadows. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. The human lowered his weapon, blood dripping from his scars, and turned to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though her body trembled, her eyes fixed on him, her voice cracked. "You fought for me, when even my own would not." The human's gaze was steady, his chest rising and falling with each age. "Ostian, I told you I don't leave anyone behind." She felt tears burn her eyes, not of weakness but of something deeper. The bond of survival, of trust forged in battle. The enemy returns. The morning was quiet, but the alien warrior girl knew the silence was dangerous. The fire had burned low, the air heavy with smoke and ash, and every breath reminded her that the world outside was not safe. She sat against the stone wall, her wounds still aching, when she noticed the human's eyes narrow as he studied the horizon. His hand tightened on his weapon, his body stiff like a wolf ready to strike. She felt the air change, the stillness breaking. A storm was coming. A faint echo of voices carried through the ruins, sharp and cold. Words she recognized. They were the voices of her own people, the same warriors who had left her bleeding in the dust. Her blood ran cold, her claws curled into fists, anger mixed with fear inside her chest. "They are hunting me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They want to erase their betrayal by ending me." The human looked at her, his expression unreadable, but his voice steady. "Then we face them together." She stared at him, disbelief flashing across her face. This human owed her nothing, yet he was willing to fight beside her. Her heart burned with shame and pride at the same time. She had once been the warrior protecting others, and now he was standing to protect her. The footsteps grew louder, armored boots crushing the stones, the sound of blades being drawn slicing the air. Shadows moved across the entrance of the shelter, dark figures circling like predators. The human lifted his weapon, his eyes calm, his stance unshaken. The first of the betrayers stepped into view, his armor polished, his face twisted with cruelty. He sneered when he saw her, broken but alive. "You should have stayed in the dirt," he spat, his voice full of venom. Her claws trembled, but before she could speak, the human stepped forward, his blade gleaming in the morning light. "You will not touch her," the human said, his woo as simple but sharp as steel. The alien warriors laughed, mocking the idea of a single human standing against them. The laughter ended quickly when the human moved fast as lightning, his blade cutting through the first attacker. Blood sprayed across the stones. The betrayers stumbled back, shock on their faces. The alien girl's heart pounded, her chest heaving. She had never seen such speed, such courage from someone who was supposed to be weaker. Another enemy lunged forward, but the human met him head-on, their weapons clashing with sparks, the sound ringing across the ruins. The girl forced herself to rise, grabbing her broken spear, her body weak but her spirit aflame. She staggered into the fight, striking at one of the betrayers, the broken spear tip cutting across his arm. Her enemy roared, swinging his blade, but the human blocked it, saving her once again. Together they fought, side by side, every movement unspoken yet in perfect rhythm. Her claws struck where his blade could not. His shield covered her when her legs faltered. For the first time in her life, she felt what true partnership meant. Not with her people, but with this human. The battle raged in the ruins, dust rising with every strike, cries of pain echoing across the stones. One by one the betrayers fell, their arrogance shattered, their blood staining the earth they thought they controlled. The last warrior standing met the human's eyes, fear finally breaking through his pride, and he fled into the shadows. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. The human lowered his weapon, blood dripping from his scars, and turned to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though her body trembled, her eyes fixed on him. Her voice cracked. "You fought for me, when even my own would not." The human's gaze was steady, his chest rising and falling with each age. "Ostian, I told you I don't leave anyone behind." She felt tears burn her eyes, not of weakness but of something deeper. The bond of survival, of trust forged in battle. Trust turns to love. The battlefield ruins were quiet now, the smell of blood still heavy in the air. The alien warrior girl leaned against the stone wall, her chest rising and falling, her broken spear still trembling in her hand. The human stood near her, his blade red with the fight, his eyes scanning the horizon for more danger. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the silence thick with everything that had just happened. Then she whispered, her voice soft and raw, "You stood by me, when even my own turned away." The human wiped his blade clean on the ground, his face calm though his body carried fresh wounds. "I told you," he said, his voice steady. "I don't abandon anyone." Those words struck her again, deeper than any weapon. She looked at him with eyes that once only saw an enemy, but now saw something different, something stronger. Her heart, still bruised by betrayal, began to feel a warmth she thought she had lost forever. He helped her back to the shelter, his arms steadying her when her legs faltered. She wanted to resist, to walk on her own, but her pride no longer outweighed her gratitude. Every step reminded her that she was alive because of him. When they reached the fire, he sat her down and began to wrap a new bandage across her side. His hands were rough but gentle, scarred by years of war yet careful not to cause her pain. She watched him in silence, her eyes studying his face, the lines of hardship, the calm strength in his jaw. This was no ordinary soldier. This was a man who carried his battles in silence and yet chose compassion when others chose cruelty. Her chest ached not from wounds, but from the storm of emotions she could no longer control. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small. Instead, she simply whispered, "You are braver than any warrior of my kind." The human looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. Eddie said nothing. He only nodded once, then placed another log on the fire, the flames lighting his face with a soft glow. For a while they sat in silence, the crackle of fire the only sound. The girl found herself staring at the flames, her heart strangely calm for the first time since her betrayal. The warmth of the fire mixed with the warmth of his presence, and she felt safer than she had ever felt with her own people. As night deepened, she finally dared to ask, "What drives you, human? Why fight for me? Why risk your life?" He thought for a moment, then answered, "Because life is worth more than war, and because no one should suffer betrayal." His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. She lowered her eyes, remembering the faces of those who abandoned her, the commander she once trusted. Her throat tightened, but she found strength in the human's voice, as if his belief was something she could lean on. When she looked up again, her gaze met his, and for a heartbeat the world outside disappeared. There was no battlefield, no betrayal, no war, only two souls broken and mending in the quiet glow of fire. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with something new, something she had never felt before. It was trust, fragile but real. And within that trust bloomed a spark she could not deny, a spark that felt dangerously close to love. She turned her face away, afraid of what her own heart was whispering, but the warmth remained, burning quietly inside her. The human leaned back against the wall, his blade resting within reach, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Still, she noticed the way his hand always rested near his weapon, always ready to defend her again. Her lips trembled as she whispered to herself, "Perhaps I was not abandoned. Perhaps I was found." The night stretched on, the fire glowing low, two figures seated side by side, not enemies, not strangers anymore. Story, but something far more powerful. The alien warrior girl closed her eyes, her heart beating with hope. And for the first time since her betrayal, she did not fear tomorrow. The final stand. The dawn broke with a cold wind sweeping across the ruins, carrying the scent of blood and ash. The alien warrior girl stirred from her uneasy rest, her body still weak, but her spirit burning stronger than before. Beside her, the human was already awake, sharpening his blade in silence, his eyes sharp and distant. He had not slept much, she knew. His duty was not only to survive, but to protect. And in that moment she realized he was preparing for something more. The storm they both felt was coming. The earth trembled faintly with approaching steps, too many to count, too heavy to be beasts. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Then she heard it, the clatter of armor, the rhythm of marching warriors. Her betrayers had returned, but not alone this time. They had gathered others, stronger, crueler, determined to erase her from the world. The human stood, his jaw set, his eyes narrowing toward the sound. He did not look afraid, but focused, like a man who had already chosen his fate. "They will not stop," she whispered, her claws digging into the stone. "They will not forgive that I lived." The human placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steady, his voice low but firm. "Then we make our stand, here and now." Her heart pounded, her warrior spirit roaring to life again, though her body still bore scars. This was not only his fight or hers, it was theirs, a battle that would decide if betrayal would win or if survival would burn brighter. She picked up her spear, cracked and broken, but still sharp enough to spill blood. The first wave of enemies came with fury, their voices like thunder, blades flashing in the rising light. The human charged forward, his roar echoing across the ruins, his blade cutting with unstoppable force. She followed, her body screaming with pain but her heart screaming louder with courage. Side by side they struck, steel against steel, claw against armor, every move born from trust and desperation. Their enemies fought fiercely, but the bond between human and alien warrior was fiercer still. The battle turned into chaos, dust and blood mixing in the air. One enemy nearly broke through, his blade raised high toward her, but the human blocked it, his own arm bleeding from the strike. Her heart raged at the sight, and with a cry she drove her spear through the attacker's chest, her strength returning with every heartbeat. She realized then that she was no longer fighting for revenge or for pride. She was fighting for him, and he, bleeding yet unyielding, was fighting for her. The enemies pressed harder, their numbers great, their fury endless. The human's movement slowed with exhaustion, his body marked with fresh wounds, yet he did not falter. The girl's claws tore through another enemy, her body trembling but her spirit refusing to fall. They fought like two flames in the darkness, burning brighter, even as the night tried to swallow them. Every strike, every block, every breath bound them closer. Warriors not of the same kind, but of the same soul. At last, the leader of the betrayers stepped forward, his armor black, his eyes filled with cruel fire. He raised his weapon high, roaring her name with hatred. "You should have stayed dead." The girl's chest tightened, fear and fury battling within her, but before she could move, the human stepped in front of her. His voice thundered with defiance. "She lives because she deserves to, and I will not let you take that from her." The clash that followed shook the ruins, their blades striking like lightning, sparks flying with each blow. The human staggered, his strength nearly spent, but the girl's spirit blazed. With a cry she joined him, their weapons striking together. One final blow that broke the betrayer's guard. Her spear pierced the rough. His cry cut short as he fell to the dust. The battlefield fell silent. The remaining enemies fled into the shadows, fear breaking their pride. From betrayal to love, the battlefield lay silent, the cries of war fading into the distance. The alien warrior girl knelt beside the human, her hands trembling as she pressed cloth against his wounds. The fire of battle was gone, but fear still burned inside her, fear of losing the one who had given her a reason to live. His breathing was heavy, his face pale, but his eyes still held that same calm strength. She whispered, her voice breaking, "Do not leave me, not like they did." The human lifted his gaze to her, his lips curving into the faintest smile. "I am not like them," he said weakly. "I keep my promises." Her heart clenched at those words, her claws trembling as she held him closer. She had lost her people, her commander, her pride. But here in her arms was something greater than all of it, a bond that betrayal could not destroy, a bond that grew from courage and compassion. She dragged him back toward the shelter, her strength almost gone, but her spirit refusing to yield. Every step was a battle, yet she refused to stop, whispering to him with every breath, "Stay with me, human, stay with me." When they reached the fire, she laid him down gently, her tears falling against his armor. She bound his wounds with what little supplies they had left, her hands shaking, but her will unbroken. Through the night she sat beside him, never moving, her heart beating with both fear and hope. As dawn painted the sky in pale gold, his eyes finally opened. She gasped with relief, pressing her hand against his cheek, her voice breaking. "You live." He nodded faintly, his voice hoarse. "I told you, I am not so easy to kill." Her laugh broke through tears, a sound filled with both sorrow and joy. She had not laughed since before the betrayal, but with him, the sound returned to her. The silence stretched between them, but it was no longer heavy. She looked at him, really low, oaked at the human who had saved her not once but again and again. Her chest tightened, not with pain but with something deeper, a truth she could no longer hide. "I was left to die by those I trusted most," she whispered, her alien eyes shimmering in the firelight. "But you gave me back my life." Her voice trembled as she leaned closer. "And my heart is no longer my own. It belongs to you." The human's eyes widened at her confession, his breath catching. For a moment he was silent, as if searching for words that carried enough weight. Then he reached for her hand, his grip weak but steady. "You are not alone anymore," he said softly, "and neither am I." Her tears fell freely now, not of pain but of release, the chains of betrayal broken at last. In their place grew something new, fragile yet stronger than steel. Love. She rested her forehead against his, their breaths mingling in the quiet shelter. The war outside no longer mattered, the betrayal no longer defined her. What mattered was the bond forged in fire, blood, and trust. A warrior abandoned by her own had been saved by an enemy. And in that salvation, she found something greater than victory. She found the heart she thought she had lost forever. Days passed, their wounds slowly healing, their bond deepening with every word and every silence. They were no longer human and alien, no longer enemy and foe, but something greater. Companions, survivors, lovers. The girl no longer dreamed of revenge. She dreamed of tomorrow, a tomorrow where they stood side by side, and as the sun rose on a new horizon, she knew her story had changed. It was no longer the story of betrayal, but the story of love born in the ashes of war. A new dawn. The ruins of the battlefield were far behind them now. The alien warrior girl and the human walked slowly through the wasteland, their wounds wrapped, their steps heavy but steady. Every sunrise felt like a small victory, proof that they had survived what should have killed them. The human leaned on a staff he had carved from broken wood, his strength returning little by little. The girl walked close beside him, her spear still cracked but carried proudly, not as a weapon of war, but as a reminder of survival. For days they moved across the broken land, sharing food when they found it, water when they could. The world around them was not kind, the skies still scarred by smoke, the earth burned and dry. Yet in the silence of their journey, a strange peace grew between them. They spoke little, but every glance, every step side by side, told more than words. Trust had become unshakable, and love, though unspoken, grew stronger with each passing day. At night, when the stars stretched endless above them, the girl would sit close to the fire. She would watch the human, his face lit by the glow, his scars sharp but his eyes soft, and she would feel her heart tremble, not with fear but with something warmer, something lasting. One night she whispered, "I was betrayed by my people, but perhaps the stars led me to you." The human looked at her quietly, his hand brushing hers. "Perhaps they did," he said. Their journey soon brought them to the edge of a forgotten village. The houses were broken, the walls crumbling, yet signs of life still flickered here and there. Children with frightened eyes peered from the shadows. Women with tired faces clutched what little food they had. The girl felt her chest tighten, for she saw herself in them, abandoned, scarred, yet still alive. The human looked at her and spoke softly. "We can help them, if they will let us." At first, the villagers were wary, their eyes filled with suspicion toward a human and a wounded alien warrior together. But when the girl showed them her scars and told them of her betrayal, something shifted. She did not speak with pride or bitterness, but with truth, showing them that survival was possible even when hope was gone. The human shared what little he had, fixing tools, teaching them how to build small fires from broken stone. Slowly the villagers began to see them not as strangers, but as a light in their darkness. The days that followed were different, filled not with war, but with rebuilding. The girl helped train the older children, teaching them how to hold a spear, not for conquest but for defense. The human worked with the others, repairing broken walls, showing them how to make shelter strong against the wind. Together, they created something she had never known before, not a battlefield, not an army, but a home. And in that home, the bond between her and the human only grew deeper. One evening, as the sun sank behind the ruins, painting the sky in fire, the girl stood beside the human on a rebuilt wall, their shoulders brushing, their silence comfortable. She turned to him, her voice steady but soft. "When I was left to die, I thought my life was over." She paused, her eyes shining. "But with you, I have found more than survival. I have found my future." The human looked at her, his eyes filled with quiet strength. "And I will walk beside you, wherever that future leads." Her heart swelled, tears touching her eyes, not of sorrow but of joy. The betrayal of her past no longer chained her. The weight of war no longer defined her. What defined her now was the man beside her, the bond they had forged and the life they were building together. The stars rose above them, brighter than before, as if blessing their path. And for the first time in her life, the alien warrior girl truly believed in tomorrow. Shadows on the horizon. The village had begun to change. Where once there were broken walls and silent streets, now smoke rose from cooking fires, and laughter of children echoed faintly in the air. The alien warrior girl walked among them with pride, her spear in hand, not as a symbol of battle but of protection. Beside her, the human carried tools instead of weapons, his scars hidden beneath a calm smile. For the first time since betrayal, she felt the taste of belonging, a place where her strength mattered again. But peace is fragile, and peace invites those who would shatter it. One night, as the stars blinked cold above the roofs, she stood guard on the wall and saw lights flickering on the horizon. At first she thought they were fires of traitors, but then she saw the glint of armor and the steady march of soldiers. Her blood froze, for the banners they carried were not friendly. They belonged to the very empire that had abandoned her. Her claws dug into the stone as the truth struck. Her betrayers had not forgotten her. They had come to finish what they started. She rushed to the human, who was repairing a shelter by the fire. "They are coming," she said, her voice sharp with fear and fury. The human looked into her eyes, and though his face tightened, his voice was steady. "Then we will stand again, just as before." Her heart ached, not with fear but with love, for he had never once turned away from danger, never once left her side. Together they warned the villagers, who gathered with trembling hands, clutching tools and broken weapons. The children cried, the mothers whispered prayers, and the elders shook their heads. The girl stood tall before them, her voice clear. "I was betrayed once, left to die, but I did not fall. I will not let you fall either." Her words gave the people strength, their fear bending into courage, for they saw her not as a wounded Zyle but as a warrior reborn. The human stood beside her, lifting his blade once more, his voice carrying across the crowd. "We fight not for power, but for each other." The villagers shouted, weak but fierce, their voices rising into the night. When the enemy soldiers reached the edge of the village, they expected fear. Instead, they saw walls rebuilt, fires burning, and warriors waiting. The leader of the enemy sneered, his eyes falling on the girl. "You should have been ashes long ago," he hissed. Her chest burned with rage, but she did not falter. She raised her spear and shouted, "I was ashes, but now I am flame." The human stepped forward, his blade gleaming, his presence unshaken. "And this flame will burn brighter than your darkness." The battle began with a roar, steel against wood, cries against silence. The villagers fought with desperate hearts, their tools striking like weapons, their fear turning into strength. The human cut through the front lines, every strike measured, every step steady. The girl moved beside him, her broken spear dancing with deadly grace, her claws striking where her weapon failed. Together, they became the heart of the village defense, two warriors standing as one, but the enemy was strong, trained, and merciless. The villagers began to falter, their lines breaking under the weight of armored soldiers. The human gritted his teeth, his arms heavy, but his will unbroken. The girl's chest heaved, her wounds aching, but she refused to stop, her voice rising above the chaos. "Stand! Stand with me!" Her cry lit fire in the hearts of the villagers, and they rose again, pushing back with renewed fury. The fight raged deep into the night, the enemy pressing hard, the defenders holding with blood and will. At last, the enemy leader clashed with the girl, his blade crashing against her spear, sparks flying into the dark. She staggered, but the human's blade struck from the side, forcing the leader back. Side by side, they fought him, every move in perfect rhythm, until at last her spear pierced his chest, ending the battle. A choice of futures. The village was quiet after the battle, the fires smoldering, the air heavy with the scent of blood and smoke. The villagers moved slowly through the ruins of their defense, tending to the wounded, carrying away the fallen. Children clung to their mothers, whispering questions too heavy for their small voices. And in the center of it all stood the alien warrior girl and the human. Their weapons lowered, their bodies scarred, their hearts still burning with the fight. They had survived again, but survival always came with a price. The elders of the village gathered near the broken wall, their eyes fixed on the two who had stood against the enemy. One of them, his face lined with age and grief, stepped forward. "You are not of our people, yet you saved us," he said, his voice trembling. Another elder bowed his head toward the girl. "You were abandoned, yet you did not abandon us. You stood like a true guardian." The villagers echoed their words, their voices rising in agreement. In their eyes, she was no longer an exile, no longer a betrayed soldier, but something far greater, a leader. The girl's chest tightened, her claws curling at her side. She had never wanted power. She had never sought command, but their voices called to something deep within her, a part of her that had been wounded when her own kind betrayed her. Now, standing here, she felt that wound healing, not through revenge, but through the trust of those she had protected. The human looked at her quietly, his scarred face calm, his eyes steady. He said softly, "They see in you what your own people never did. They see someone worth following." Her throat ached, her voice low. "But I am not whole. I am scarred, broken." The human shook his head. "No, you are stronger because of it," he said firmly. "Your scars show that you endured, that you rose again." She looked into his eyes, and in them she saw no doubt, only truth. For a moment the world around her faded, and there was only him, the one who had given her hope. Her heart whispered a truth she could no longer deny, that her strength was no longer only her own. It was theirs. Days turned into weeks, and the village began to grow under their guidance. The human taught them how to build stronger walls, how to forge tools from broken metal, how to make fire last longer. The girl trained the young to defend themselves, not with hatred but with courage. Together they created something new, not an army, not an empire, but a family. The sound of laughter slowly returned, mixing with the ring of hammers and the crackle of fires. Yet even in peace, shadows lingered. Travelers came with rumors, whispers of larger forces gathering, whispers that the war beyond the horizon was far from over. The girl knew their village would not be ignored forever, that more battles would come, stronger and harder. She feared for the people she now called her own. But when she looked at the human, her fear lessened, for in his presence she felt unbreakable, as if together they could endure anything. One evening, under a sky full of stars, she walked with him along the rebuilt wall. The village slept behind them, but the world stretched endless before their eyes. She turned to him, her voice quiet. "What do you see for us, human? What future do you imagine?" He was silent for a moment, then answered, "I see a place where betrayal has no hold, where we live not as enemies but as one, a future we build together." Her heart swelled, tears shimmering in her alien eyes, and she whispered, "Then that is the future I choose." They stood in silence, the night wind carrying the scent of earth and ash. Two souls once broken, now bound by love and trust. The girl no longer carried the weight of betrayal. She carried the hope of Tom. Oro, and with the human at her side, she knew she was no longer a lost warrior, but something greater, a protector, a leader, and above all, a woman who had found her heart again.